Phil Campbell spent 31 years in Motörhead, but in reality his relationship with his band started way earlier, and he was in fact much more than just a Motörhead guitarist.
On the guitar with Motörhead for 20 long and miserable years, Philip Augustus Campbell III.
So today, in honor of the legendary Phil Campbell, who is rocking out in heaven together with Lemmy Kilmister right now, let's go all the way back and take a look at how Phil Campbell went from the Welsh underground scene to becoming one of the most important parts of Motörhead legacy, and why this story is actually way more interesting than many realize. Here you go. Unlike many of his counterparts, Phil Campbell was actually one of those kids you could call a prodigy. Born on May 7th in 1961, he started playing guitar at just 10 years old, being a huge fan of Jimi Hendrix, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Jan Ackerman, Todd Rundgren, and another guitar prodigy, Michael Schenker, who, by the way, was actually barely older than Phil at that time, yet was already rocking the stages around the globe. As yeah, that blonde German kid was just 16 back then. And right there, from the beginning, the story of his childhood actually becomes rather interesting, as just 2 years later, being just 12 years old, Phil Campbell met the man whom his life will be connected with for more than 45 years. As being a young kid, he attended the Hawkwind concert in Cardiff, with nobody else but with someone who will actually become his lifelong friend in the lineup, Lemmy Kilmister. And according to Phil, the whole experience was completely overwhelming. The lights, the sound, the whole sci-fi chaos of Hawkwind, it freaked him out in best possible way. But the thing that stuck with him the most was that after that concert, only one Hawkwind member went out of his way to meet his fans. And ironically, it was the guy who gave young Phil an autograph that night, with whom Phil Campbell would be sharing the stage for decades afterwards. And by the time Phil turned 13, he was already playing semi-professionally in local pub and cabaret bands like Contrast and later on Rocktopus, touring across South Wales and getting real stage experience way before most musicians even figure out their first chord, gaining experience all the way until 1979, when Phil finally made his first steps towards a professional career and eventually stardom. And that step's name was Persian Risk. In the beginning of 1979, Phil Campbell played in yet another local band called Stone Soul Party. He had been rather unhappy with the creative direction of that band, and wanting to take full control of the creative process, he actually formed yet another project while still being a part of Stone Soul Party. And that project will eventually become Persian Risk, for the original lineup of which Phil recruited musicians he had known from local South Wales scene, among whom was the bassist Nick Hughes, who will of course remain the core member of this band even after Campbell's departure. Soon after, they were joined by vocalist John Deverell, a trained singer from the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama, which gave the band a slightly more refined edge compared to most of the other new wave of British heavy metal acts of that time. And it is with this lineup with which Persian Risk recorded their first ever demo material in a small studio in Cardiff, including tracks like Calling For You, Chase the Dragon, and 50,000 Stallions, which the band would later on eventually re-record with yet another vocalist. However, as it often happens with young bands, that lineup didn't last long. John Deverell left fairly quickly, and in a very interesting twist, he ended up joining Tigers of Pantan, who at that time were gaining serious momentum in the new wave of British heavy metal scene. With Deverell on vocals, they recorded Spellbound in 1981, which did become one of their most successful releases, and which, by the way, in my opinion, is one of those albums that truly captures the whole essence of the new wave of British heavy metal movement. So if you would like me to release a special episode about that one sometime in the future, please do let me know in the comments. Because yeah, in case you guys didn't realize, I'm really trying to find an excuse to do so. I hear you call, you had my soul. Yet after John Deverell's departure, Persian Risk of course did not cease to exist. Quite the opposite. They quickly found a replacement for John, who actually happens to be yet another future iconic frontman, Carl Santance. Yeah, that one. And it is with Sentence on vocals with whom Persian Risk actually began to properly establish themselves. They re-recorded earlier material and released their debut single Calling For You in 1981, followed by appearances on key compilations like Heavy Metal Heroes Volume 2 and Neat Records 60 Minutes Plus, which, in case you guys wonder, yes, were a pretty big deal back in the early 80s. And it was after those compilations when Persian Risk started to get some traction. The band quickly released their second single, Riding High, via Neat Records, that also featured the song Hurt You on the B-side. And that one suddenly turned Persian Risk from the underground heroes to one of the most discussed band in the scene, as Riding High got incredibly strong reviews, possibly the strongest ever for Persian Risk, allowing themselves to recruit a second guitarist, Graham Bath, in the band's attempt to aim for a bigger, more powerful sound, and to relentlessly on their quest for stardom, which actually was almost there, until in 1984 everything changed, as it was back in 1984 when Phil Campbell get an opportunity of a lifetime. Here guys, just super quickly, wanted to point out that only around 30% of the people who watch my videos are actually subscribed to this channel. So if you're not one of those, and especially if this is not the first video you're watching here, I would really appreciate it if you would consider subscribing right now. Let's continue building this amazing heavy metal community together. In 1984, Motörhead suddenly found themselves without a guitarist after Brian Robertson left the band. And for a group that was constantly touring and operating at full speed, this wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a serious problem that had to be solved rather quickly. And at the same time, Phil Campbell was still very much grounded in reality, working a regular job delivering frozen chickens for his father's company. Yeah, you heard that right. And one day he came across an advertisement in Melody Maker announcing that Motörhead were looking for a new guitarist. And although he was aware that Robertson left, he still didn't think that this was something he should have pursued at that time. And it was actually his wife who pushed him to give it a shot, which actually turned out to be one of those small life decisions that ended up changing everything for Phil Campbell and everything for the many die-hard Motörhead fans. Pretty much right away, Phil sent the band a copy of the Persian Risk single, didn't think too much of it, and carried on with his daily routine, until he came home one day and found a letter inviting him for an audition. An audition on which Phil later on recalled when Lemmy started playing bass, Phil thought that this was the loudest thing he's ever heard in his life. But if we're being very honest, Phil Campbell actually had a foot in the door at that audition, as Motörhead were actually no strangers to Persian Risk, who supported them on July 3rd in 1983 in St. Otto, Cornwall. So they did already most likely know who Phil Campbell was, and they did already most likely have a chance to get wasted with Phil just a year earlier. Even if Lemmy himself, of course, did not connect him to the 12-year-old boy he met 11 years before. But the most interesting thing is that Phil was actually not the only guitarist auditioning that night. Another player, Michael Virgil Burston, was also trying out for the band, and initially the idea was to choose only one of them. However, once Lemmy heard them playing together, the decision became unexpectedly simple, and instead of choosing between them, they actually decided to hire both. Just like that, transforming Motörhead to a four-piece lineup with two guitarists, absolutely transforming their sound for years to come and opening one of the most financially successful eras of that band. And the rest, of course, is all history we all know and love. Phil Campbell spends 31 years in Motörhead until Lemmy's death on December 28, 2015. Records 16 studio albums with the band, gives hundreds of concerts all across the world, and becomes one of the most beloved guitarists this band has ever had, and a true legend for every die-hard Motörhead fan. And all of that started with a newspaper ad, a demo tape, and a job delivering frozen chickens. So yeah, not too bad of a story. Even after joining Motörhead and stepping into a completely different league, Phil Campbell never really cut ties with where he came from. In 1984, not long after joining Motörhead, Phil helped his former band by bringing them on as a support act for Motörhead's UK tour, which was a huge opportunity for a band that was still struggling to break through and which had just lost one of their key members. And of course, Persian Risk did continue without Phil in the band, and eventually released their debut album Rise Up in 1986, which featured mostly new material, although a couple of tracks like Dark Tower and Skies Falling Down still carry traces of the earlier era when Phil was still involved. Yet after the release of Rise Up, and despite quite positive reviews of that album, there was yet another departure which would actually pause this band's history for nearly quarter a century. Karl Santens unexpectedly received an invitation to join Geezer Butler's band, which at that point was a huge opportunity no musician in his position would realistically turn down. Yet without their frontman, and while still struggling to gain the real momentum, this departure resulted in Persian Risk disbanding, until they reunited once again back in 2012, when Karl Santens brought Persian Risk back with a completely new lineup and released the album Once a King, which not only introduced new material but also revisited the band's earlier sound, including a re-recorded version of Riding High, featuring some pretty awesome guest appearances, including by nobody else but the legendary Don Airey himself. And this is where things come full circle, as during the touring cycle for Once a King, Phil Campbell joined Persian Risk on stage in 2013 in Cardiff, effectively returning to the very place where everything had started for him decades earlier. And just 2 years later, even appeared on their Who Am I album, contributing to a band who helped him gain a name for himself and eventually lent a gig of a lifetime for Phil. And this, in my opinion, just shows how loyal Phil Campbell actually was. Loyal to his friends, his family, and his lifelong fans. Both in honoring the roots of his own career and honoring the band that has given him an initial push, and playing together with Motörhead for over 31 years. And unlike many other guitarists of the genre, after joining a major band, Phil Campbell never looked for better opportunities. Quite the opposite. He dedicated his entire life to Motörhead, with the only projects he's been a part of outside of Motörhead being his solo album Old Lions Still Roar in 2019, a children's musical project Panda Party, and of course Phil Campbell and the Bastard Sons, a project that included his own children and kept that same raw and honest rock and roll spirit alive. So yeah, this is the entire professional journey of the legendary Phil Campbell, the man without whom the story of the legendary Motörhead would never have been the same, and the story of the entire genre of heavy metal would never have been the same. So guys, today, blast Motörhead as loud as you possibly can in honor of the legendary Phil Campbell, who sadly passed away at the age of just 64 years old and is now, I truly believe in this, rocking out together with his lifelong friend, Lemmy Kilmister. But anyways, which is your favorite song featuring Phil Campbell on guitars? Please let us know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching this short video, guys, and we will prevail. Slava Ukraini!